The humming began every dawn, a pressure more felt than heard, a subterranean growl rolling beneath the boulevards of Dominion City. It seeped up through copper drains and steel elevator shafts, pressed against apartment windows, rattled the hollow bones behind the ear. By the time citizens stepped into the street for compulsory roll call, the hum had pried open their chests and poured its prescription inside, a cocktail of docility, faint unease, and the peculiar lethargy that followed sorrow. Some wept, though they could not name why. Others shuffled in silence, heads bowed as if mourning a secret funeral. The directorate called the program emotive governance. No one dared call it the weapon it was. Ari Havelock remembered the city before. She remembered applause that rose like birds from the old symphony hall. Now a detention center, converted to an acoustic substation. Once she'd been first chair cellist. Now she repaired black market radios for neighbors who whispered they wanted to remember music. Her basement shop, lit by a single tungsten bulb, smelled of solder and dust, and a grief she kept tightly tuned, like gut strings stretched across an unseen bridge. That evening, as the national curfew siren bled into the skyline, someone knocked. 3 soft taps that sketched a half-remembered melody, the opening of Mendelssohn's Hebrides Overture. Ari froze. Few recalled that phrase. Fewer dared use it as a signal. She slid a panel behind the cellar shelves, revealing a narrow corridor shaped by bomb rubble, and beckoned the figure inside. The visitor tugged off a gray courier cap, releasing a spill of silver-black hair. Lysander Rhee, once the Philharmonic's principal trumpeter, long presumed re-educated. Deep lines bracketed his mouth, but his eyes still carried that brass player's shine, half mischief, half defiance. "I need a calibration artist," he said without greeting, "and we need you tonight." Ari's reply was a flat, incredulous laugh. "I'm not an artist anymore. I'm barely a citizen." "Good." Lysander rested a palm on the dusty cello case she kept strictly for ghosts. "Artists improvise. Citizens obey. We require the former." He opened a sketch folio. Inside lay stratified sheets of graph paper, each scribbled with waveforms, annotations, color-coded bars. She recognized the signature amplitude spikes, 7 Hz fundamental, 9.1 overtones, phased pulses nested like Russian dolls, the directorate's emotional manipulation blueprint. "We stole these yesterday," Lysander said. "They're preparing a new broadcast for Unity Day. The towers will drench the entire capital in a resonance they're calling composure. Translation: permanent numbness, immunization against outrage." He tapped the outer margin, where someone had scrawled a separate sequence in red ink, counter frequencies mapped to familiar pitches. "Our acousticians believe live instruments, played at exact microtonal deviations, can disrupt the carrier wave. If we synchronize at sufficient decibels, we don't just cancel the signal, we override it." Ari felt her pulse accelerate, each beat a hammer against her ribs. "You're talking about open warfare," she whispered. "Call it counterpoint," Lysander said. "We're forming an orchestra." She remembered a dream she'd tried to forget. The stage lights, 65 musicians inhaling as one, the cosmic intake before the downbeat. She swallowed. Where? Beneath the waterworks, in the old filtration cistern. The stone echoes like a cathedral, and the directorate abandoned it after the floods. "Will you come?" He extended a brass token. The Philharmonic's defunct membership pin, treble clef twined with laurel. Ari closed her fingers around it. The metal was still warm from his skin. "I'll come," she said. The entrance to the cistern lay behind a boarded-up bathhouse. Ari descended a spiral of wet iron, and emerged onto a platform of mossy limestone. The chamber stretched the length of 3 football fields, its vaults held aloft by forest-like columns. Lanterns ringed the perimeter, glinting off puddles. And there, half vanished in the gloom, were instruments she hadn't seen in years. An antique contrabassoon, a crystalline glass harmonica, a drum kit rigged to repurposed subwoofers. Musicians milled among cables and oscilloscopes, assembling an arsenal the directorate could not have imagined. At the center stood Mara Vauclain, former conductor turned insurgent icon. Her cane clicked on stone as she approached, her posture still a maestro's, spine straight, chin lifted to catch some cosmic breeze. "Ari Havelock," she said, voice crackling like a vinyl record. "Your intonation was talked about in the corridors after every concert. Glad it will finally save lives." Ari couldn't answer. The silence after praise felt cavernous. Mara gestured toward a semicircle of chairs. "Our Orpheus collective numbers 37. Enough for chamber richness, agile enough to move when the jackboots find us. Tonight's rehearsal is decisive. Lysander believes you can calibrate the drone nullifiers." She pointed to a cluster of battered laptop shells connected to steel resonators the size of wine barrels. "Those will absorb directorate lows and feed them to you as in-ear monitors. Play each pitch a hair sharp of the interference node, and we create standing waves that invert their emotional load." A technician handed Ari a graphite bow, its frog engraved with an extinct flag. She unsnapped her cello's locks. The varnish still smelled faintly of linseed and memory. They began with a single tone, F sharp below middle C, bowed by contrabassist Kaito Holt. It quivered through the cistern, met by the soft electronic seep of the nullifiers. Ari found the pitch on her A string, sliding until micro-beats faded, then inched a cent higher. A subtle bloom rippled the air. Mara raised her cane, impromptu baton, and cued the flutes. Overtones stacked, wove lace. When the trumpets entered with a minor seventh sting, the floor itself seemed to lift. After 10 minutes, sweat beaded foreheads, though the room was cold. Between passages, Mara would stop them, mutter algebraic intervals, reorder instrumentation. They were not rehearsing compositions so much as forging ammunition. During a break, Ari ducked behind a column to rest her shoulder. Lysander joined her, tucking a cloth over his trumpet's bell. "Do you feel it?" he murmured. She nodded. "It's like breathing after being underwater for years." He leaned against the damp stone. "I used to think revolution was guns and slogans. Turns out it's nuance of intonation. Makes sense if you consider how they took us, 1 decibel at a time." A siren wailed distantly. Curfew above ground. Their time dwindled. Mara convened them near a charcoal sketch of Dominion's central plaza, pinned to the cistern wall. "Unity Day parade begins 9 a.m., she said, tapping the square. "The directorate will unveil their aural eidolon tower, an array of subterranean woofers coupled to surface loudspeakers. They'll broadcast composure across 30 kilometers. We, meanwhile, will position on 3 flanks, using wireless relays to synchronize. The audience, our fellow citizens, must hear us within 6 seconds of the first directorate pulse. Delay means the emotional sedative takes hold, and they won't care if we play Mozart or detonate fireworks." She pointed her cane at Ari. "You'll be in the north tunnel with strings and woodwinds, commanding the primary harmonic inversion. Think of yourself as the spine. Hold firm, and courage will flow. Flinch, and the city's lost." Ari's stomach knotted, but she stood straight, meeting the old conductor's steely regard. "We tune at 7:30, Mara added. "And remember, we are not here to entertain. We are here to rehumanize." Unity Day dawned under a sky brushed sterile white by geoengineering drones. Banners claimed Year 10 of harmonious rule. Streets were cordoned by armored personnel carriers, whose exhaust vents doubled as subwoofer ports. Citizens filed into bleachers flanked by riot officers. Beneath their feet, Ari crouched with her ensemble, the tunnel ceiling so low her scroll nearly scraped concrete. Sweat pooled in her clavicle despite the chill. In her earpiece, the collective's encrypted channel crackled. "Resonance check, South Wing?" someone whispered. "East Apergio standing by," answered another. Mara's voice slid through, calm as a metronome. "All positions, Directorate oscillators engaging in 30 seconds. Breathe on 2. Exhale on 4. Ari inhaled, counting silently. Around her, violinist Sarah Lou flexed fingers over gut strings. Oboist Jalil clicked brass keys like nervous teeth. They'd rehearsed the opening chord 100 times, but never with citizen souls on the line. Above, something rumbled, the Directorate's system waking. Ari felt it first in her ankles, a crawling vibration climbing bone. Her vision shimmered. Breath hiccuped. Tears spiked without origin. Around her, musicians sagged, pupils diffused. "Hold focus," she hissed, bow poised. "One measure till entrance." Through her monitor, the nullifiers fed the bass frequency, isolating it from the city noise. 7 hertz, amplitude rising. She listened for its partials, found the pocket just sharp of the third overtone. She sounded a soft G on her C string, sliding up. The interference pulses slowed, phantom heartbeats consenting to hers. Mara's click track counted them in. 4-4, and into the downbeat. The opening chord burst like sunlight through basement glass. Violas, cellos, bassoons locking in stacked fifths. Violins arced upward. Flutes trilled microglissandi that laced the extremes. Trumpets, from some distant tunnel, added harmonic grit. The collective's real-time acoustic software adjusted each attack, feeding corrections to in-ear buds. With each micro-shift, the destructive interference bloomed, neutralizing the Directorate's sedative partials. Ari felt the hum in her chest lighten, replaced by a slow, trembling warmth, hope, unfiltered and terrifying. Through a grate overhead, she glimpsed bleachers. Citizens lifted chins, blinking as if thrown from nightmares. When the collective modulated into Lydian mode, an ancient trickster tonality, children laughed, spontaneous and bright. Soldiers hesitated, rifles slipping an inch. The Directorate responded. Subwoofer vents roared, doubling volume. The low-end pummeled tunnel walls, dislodging centuries of dust. In Ari's monitors, the amplitude needle surged toward red. Ears popped, stomachs lurched. "Phase pivot," Mara shouted across comms. "Counterpoint sequence delta." Ari shifted bowing style, digging near the bridge to pull gritty harmonics. Jalil threaded an atonal oboe shriek, precisely tuned to invert the new sub-bass spike. Brass answered with a snarling cluster chord. It wasn't pretty. It was anatomical. A bloodstream turned electric. Above, tower loudspeakers shuddered. Glass storefronts crazed. Ari imagined Directorate engineers scrambling, looking at readouts that no longer obeyed simulation. Then a betrayal. Static cracked over comms. "Southern relay compromised," gasped a voice she recognized. Kaido. "Drones inbound." The line cut. A low boom reverberated from the south tunnels, followed by water rushing. The collective had planned for contingencies, but not flooding. Mara didn't falter. "East and north wings, reinforced spectrum holes, tenacity or death." Ari's muscles burned. Bow hairs snapped, drifting like snow. She felt the cello's spruce belly vibrate so violently, she worried the seams would split. Yet the chord persisted. shifting, flexing, deflecting the onslaught. Something changed in the air. The audience was singing. It started as hums, the memory of lullabies mothers had stopped daring to croon. Then syllables formed, nonsense at first, until someone coughed out the forbidden anthem, Garden of the Dawn. More joined, ragged, unsure. Ari's own throat tightened, but she couldn't sing. She had her battle to fight. Still, she heard them. Thousands of voices threading into the collective's weave, adding a human overtone beyond any scoreboard. The directorate panicked. Sirens wailed above the music. Commands to disperse shouted through megaphones. But the people did not disperse. They sang louder. Soldiers wavered, some tearing earpieces away. One officer dropped his baton, clapped along, tears streaking camouflage paint. A mechanical shriek sliced the chaos. Prefect Cross's private gunship, descending near the tower. Twin rotors chopped the air, each blade a sonic razor. Through loudhailers, the prefect unleashed a new frequency, unfamiliar to Ari's schematics. A 14 Hz alternating pattern designed, she guessed, for pure terror. The first pulses struck like migraine hammers. Knots of citizens crumpled. Singers choked. In the tunnels, Jalil doubled over, oboe tumbling. The cello's end pin vibrated off the floor. Ari! Mara croaked through static. Their frequencies above nullifier threshold. We need raw resonance, something acoustic only. Ari's thoughts blurred, but a memory surfaced. The opening solo from Elgar's cello concerto. Lament turned fury. She had played it on her final night before the halls closed, weeping through the cadenza. Its tessitura sat perfectly between 7 and 14 Hertz multiples. She flagged Sarah with her eyes and jerked her scroll. A conductor's cue. Silence. A breath. Then Ari began the solo, not precisely as written, but elongated, excavated. She drew the bow slower than physics recommended, coaxing subharmonics that wove beneath the audible melody. The note bloomed, D, rich as soil, vibrating ribs, tunnel, city. Violas answered with a minor third, horns with a hopeful sixth. The phrase rose, rose, and at the apex, she slid into the most dangerous technique she knew. Sul ponticello flautando, playing near the bridge so the note fractured into shimmering glass. Overtones like swarm of atoms filled the cavity, colliding with the prefect's terror band. Oscilloscopes fried. The gunship reeled sideways, rotors misaligned by resonance. It drifted, clipped the Oral Eidolon tower. Steel moaned, cables snapped. The tower listed, speakers toppling like domino teeth. When it hit the plaza, a single thunderclap fractured windows across 4 blocks. The terror frequency died mid-pulse. Silence followed. A silence neither the directorate nor the collective controlled. An emergent, collective silence. People listening to themselves, to possibility. From that hush, someone began to clap. Then thousands. The sound ricocheted through the plaza, down ventilation shafts, into the cistern. It reached Ari as a cascade of percussive love. She slumped forward, forehead against her cello's shoulder, tears finally able to fall. In the distance, sirens still howled, armored doors still slammed, but the city's emotional compass had pivoted. Fear no longer pointed north. After sunset, the collective gathered in the ruined amphitheater, the site of Dominion's first symphony gala, a century earlier. Fires from toppled drones flickered like demented footlights. Citizens, no, compatriots, brought blankets, bread, improvised bandages. Some directorate officers, now deserters, helped carry wounded musicians. Mara stood at center stage, leaning heavier on her cane, aging 10 years in a day. We bought time, she told the crowd. Tomorrow they'll try again. But now we have our own frequency, each other. Ari sat on the steps, shoulder throbbing. Lysander approached. Trumpeter's embouchure split, but smiling. You saved us, he said. She shook her head. We saved ourselves. He lowered beside her, offering a battered mouthpiece. Play a duet? No rehearsals, no agenda. She smiled, a small, miraculous thing, and raised her bow. They chose no key, no meter. Just breathed and began, a conversation older than speech, newer than birth. The plaza fell silent to listen. Sound rose into the bruised sky, not weapon, not command. Simply evidence. Hearts beating, resilient, defiant. Tonight, Dominion City remembered its own pulse, no longer dictated by hidden machines, but homegrown in flesh and song. Far off, the Directorate's surviving towers were still, their red status lights blinking like distant, defeated satellites. They would wake again, maybe, but the citizens had heard themselves, and silence would never again taste the same. Somewhere beneath the rubble, a 7 Hertz oscillator blinked, impotent, drowned by the faint echo of a cello's low D that refused, absolutely refused, to decay.